The sterile beep of the heart monitor pierced the fog in my skull like a knife, each pulse sinking with a throbbing ache in my chest where the ventilator tube snaked down my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, but my eyes. God, my eyes were wide open, locked on the man I called Dad as he stood at the foot of my ICU bed. His face, usually etched with that familiar mix of gruff concern and quiet pride, twisted into something cold, unrecognizable. "I'm sorry, kid," he muttered. His voice gravelly from years of chain-smoking, the same voice that had read me bedtime stories and yelled at me for scraping the car. He glanced at the door, where nurses bustled like ghosts in scrubs, then back at me. "But this is where it ends." He turned and walked out, his boots echoing on the linoleum like a final betrayal, leaving me alone in that white-walled prison, tubes hissing air into my lungs, wondering if the car crash that put me here was really an accident or his way of tying up loose ends. That was the hook that gutted me, the abandonment in my hour of need, from the man who'd raised me for 27 years. But the real fury came hours later, when the police arrived. I was still intubated, my body a battlefield of bruises and broken ribs from the wreck, but they pulled up chairs beside my bed, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. The detective, a woman with sharp eyes and a ponytail that screamed no nonsense, leaned in close. "Emily," she said softly, using the name I'd always known, "we ran your prints after the accident. You're not who you think you are." My heart rate spiked, the monitor screaming in protest. She slid a faded photo across the tray table. A toddler with my curls, my eyes, reported missing from a small town in Ohio 27 years ago. "Your real name is Sarah Thompson. The man you call Dad. He's Richard Hale, your kidnapper. He took you when you were 2. Denial hit first, a tidal wave crashing through my drugged haze. No, that couldn't be. Dad, Richard, had been my rock. He taught me to ride a bike on cracked sidewalks in our run-down Chicago apartment, worked double shifts at the factory to buy me that second-hand prom dress. But as the detective spoke, fragments clicked into place. His paranoia about photos, the way we'd move every few years without warning. His aversion to family holidays that might invite questions. Heartbreak clawed at me, raw and unrelenting, as if my entire life was a house of cards collapsing in slow motion. I wanted to rip out the tubes and scream, but all I could do was stare at that photo, my tiny face smiling innocently, oblivious to the theft of my future. By the time they extubated me 2 days later, the resentment had festered into something darker. My throat burned like I'd swallowed fire, but I forced words out to the social worker hovering like a well-meaning vulture. "Where is he?" croaked. She hesitated, her clipboard a shield. "Richard fled after leaving you here. We're searching, but he's gone underground." Humiliation burned in my cheeks. Abandoned like trash, my father vanishing into the night because the truth was closing in. I lay there, the hospital sheets rough against my skin, the metallic tang of blood still in my mouth from the crash, and let the anger simmer. It wasn't just the kidnapping. It was the lie of love, the fabricated memories he'd planted like weeds in my soul. Discharged after a week, I stumbled into the world as Sarah Thompson, a name that felt like a stranger's coat, ill-fitting, heavy with ghosts. My biological parents were dead, killed in a house fire 10 years after my abduction, the detective had said. No siblings, no aunts. Just a small inheritance waiting in a trust. I rented a dingy motel room on the outskirts of the city, the kind with peeling wallpaper and a neon sign buzzing outside like a migraine. Nights blurred into obsession. I'd pace the threadbare carpet, replaying every moment with Richard. The fishing trips where he'd ruffle my hair and call me his little miracle. The arguments over boyfriends. His overprotectiveness now reeking of possession. Guilt twisted in my gut. Had I loved a monster? Or worse, was part of me still loving him, clinging to the illusion? I started digging, my laptop screen casting a ghostly glow in the dim room. Public records, old news clippings. Anything to piece together the man who'd stolen me. Richard Hale, ex-con for petty theft before my abduction, a drifter who'd charmed his way into my real parents' neighborhood as a handyman. Motive. The articles speculated loneliness, a twisted desire for family after his own wife left him childless. But I knew better. It was control, pure and simple. He'd molded me into his perfect daughter, erasing my past with stories of a dead mother I never had. Resentment boiled into fantasies, tracking him down, confronting him with the photo, watching his face crumple as I spat the truth. But doubt crept in. What if he had reasons? What if revenge made me no better than him? Weeks turned to months, the Chicago winter biting through the motel's thin windows. I took a job at a coffee shop, the steam from espressos fogging my vision as customers chattered obliviously. One evening, a regular, an older man with salt and pepper hair, struck up conversation. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on you, kid," he said, sliding a tip across the counter. His voice, that casual warmth, echoed Richard's, and fury surged. I slammed the register shut, my hands trembling. "Mind your own business," I snapped, the words laced with suppressed rage. He backed off, but inside I was unraveling. That night, I dreamed of Richard's face, his apologetic murmur in the ICU morphing into laughter. I woke sweating, heart pounding, resolve hardening like ice. I couldn't let him vanish. Revenge wasn't just desire. It was necessity, a way to reclaim the self he'd shattered. Subtle hints of my plan emerged in quiet moments. I bought a burner phone from a shady electronics store, the clerk's greasy fingers brushing mine as he handed it over. Online forums for missing persons, ironic now that I was found, yielded tips on tracking fugitives. Skip tracing public databases, even hiring a PI if the inheritance allowed. But fear gnawed. What if he was watching? Paranoia mirrored his own, a poisoned inheritance. Moral conflict raged. Revenge felt justified, but was it? He'd raised me, fed me, loved me in his warped way. Yet the betrayal burned brighter, a fire I couldn't extinguish. One rainy afternoon, a breakthrough. An old associate of Richard's, mentioned in a faded arrest record, still lived in the city. I drove my beat-up sedan through slick streets, wipers slapping rhythmically like a heartbeat. The man, Gus, answered the door in a stained undershirt, reeking of beer. "Richard, haven't seen that bastard in years," he grumbled, but his eyes darted. I pressed, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "He kidnapped me, Gus." I was too. Shock flickered across his face, then guilt. "Jesus. He always said you were his niece or something. Last I heard he was heading south, maybe Texas. Said he had a score to settle." The words hung heavy, rain drumming on the roof like applause for my budding vengeance. Back in the motel, I mapped it out on scraps of paper, the ink bleeding in the humidity. Texas, a vast needle in a haystack, but a start. Obsession gripped me. Meals forgotten, sleep fractured by visions of confrontation. Heartbreak evolved into cold resolve, each breath a step toward payback. But layered beneath was doubt. Would finding him heal or destroy me? The slow burn built, tension coiling like a spring. The Texas sun baked the asphalt as I pulled into a dusty border town 6 months later. My inheritance dwindled to gas money and cheap motels. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the scent of mesquite and exhaust, a far cry from Chicago's chill. I'd followed breadcrumbs, a fake ID trail, whispers from online sleuths, even a blurry photo from a truck stop CCTV that matched Richard's gaunt frame. He was here, holed up in a trailer park on the outskirts, working odd jobs under an alias. The PI I'd hired with the last of my funds confirmed it. His report crisp in my glove compartment like a loaded gun. Inner conflict raged as I parked a block away, the engine ticking cool in the silence. Part of me screamed to call the cops, let justice handle it. But resentment whispered louder. They wouldn't make him feel the abandonment, the hollow ache of a stolen life. I wanted him to see my face, to know the daughter he'd forged had become his undoing. Guilt flickered. Revenge was morally gray, a mirror to his crimes. But fury won, a cold blade in my chest. The trailer park was a labyrinth of rusted metal homes, dogs barking in the distance, the ground crunching under my sneakers like brittle bones. His unit squatted at the end, faded blue paint peeling like old skin. I knocked, heart hammering, the door creaking open to reveal him. Thinner, grayed, but unmistakable. "Emily," he whispered, eyes widening in shock. "No, Sarah," I thought, but said nothing, pushing inside. The interior reeked of stale smoke and regret, clutter of yellowed newspapers and empty bottles painting a picture of a man unraveling. "You left me to die," I said, voice steady, though humiliation burned anew. He backed against the wall, hands raised. I panicked. The crash. It was an accident, but they were closing in. I couldn't let them take you. Lies, layered with desperation. We talked or argued for hours, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows through grimy windows. He confessed in fragments. The abduction born of grief after losing his own child to illness, a momentary madness that snowballed into decades of deception. "I loved you like my own," he pleaded, tears streaking his weathered face. "Gave you a life." Rage boiled. His love was theft, a cage disguised as home. But as he spoke, complexity emerged. He'd shielded me from his darker past. Abuse from his father, a cycle he swore to break. Moral grayness seeped in. Was he monster or broken man? Doubt clawed, but betrayal's scar ran deeper. I feigned forgiveness, my words honeyed manipulation. "Maybe we can start over," I lied, watching relief flood his eyes. Inside, plans crystallized. Not violence, but exposure, stripping him bare as he'd stripped my identity. That night, in a seedy bar down the road, neon lights buzzing like angry bees, I gathered evidence. Hidden photos from his trailer, my toddler self, clippings of the kidnapping, scanned on my phone. I contacted the FBI tip line anonymously, but held back, savoring the control. Suspense built in quiet calculations. Following him to work, noting routines, planting seeds of paranoia with unsigned notes left on his door. "I know who you are," one read. He grew jumpy, glancing over shoulders, mirroring my own fears months ago. Tension peaked on a stormy evening, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. I confronted him again, rain lashing the trailer roof. "Why me?" I demanded, voice cracking with suppressed rage. He slumped, defeated. "You reminded me of her, my lost girl. I couldn't let go." Heartbreak mingled with obsession. Part of me pitied him, a fractured soul. But resolve hardened. As he begged for mercy, I revealed the twist. I'd laced his coffee with sedatives from a black market source, nothing lethal, just enough to immobilize. "You'll wake in custody," I whispered, dialing the authorities as his eyes fluttered shut. Poetic justice. Abandoned as he'd abandoned me. The cops arrived, sirens wailing through the downpour, cuffing his limp form. But the real payoff came later. In interrogation, he confessed everything, including a hidden motive. My biological parents' insurance money he'd siphoned indirectly through forged documents. Greed, not just grief. The shock rippled through me. His love tainted further. Yet as I drove away, freedom tasting like rain-soaked air, unexpected consequences loomed. Guilt resurfaced. Had I become the manipulator he'd been? Revenge delivered closure, but at what cost? The road stretched ahead, endless, a metaphor for the morally gray path I'd walked. In the rearview, lightning illuminated the trailer park fading. A chapter closed, but scars eternal.